In the video game industry, there's always something else for gamers to play, and new games risk losing their player bases almost as soon as they get them, a fact these games found out the hard way. Here are the hotly anticipated games that lost most of their player base in just a few short months. Clancy's The Division. Ubisoft's much-anticipated third-person shooter The Division launched to critical acclaim in March 2016. By June, only 3 months later, the game had lost 93% of its player base, falling from 2.1 million players per day to a mere 143,000. While the online shooter was by no means a bad game, The Division had its fair share of problems. Matchmaking issues and stat bugs stunted gameplay, with cheating and hacking plaguing the dark zone. These days, The Division is all but dead, with less than 3% of the game's launch window peak still playing. It's tough to imagine Ubisoft feeling too bad about the drop-off in players, however, seeing as they raked in $330 million in 5 days.
Now to sleep the sleep of the just.
For Honor. Hitting shelves in February 2017, Ubisoft's For Honor promised explosive player versus player combat, with gamers able to fight as either knights, samurai, or Vikings in a medieval setting. Sounds incredible, right? Like many games from the top-tier French developer, For Honor looked and in many ways was awesome. Unfortunately, severe technical issues rewarded Ubisoft with a 95% reduction in the game's player base in only 3 months. In a game that's all about thinking ahead and executing quick reactions, Ubisoft's decision to run For Honor over a peer-to-peer connection completely ruined the experience. Players who bought For Honor at launch were seriously disappointed, and even organized a boycott of the game. Nobody wants to see a game fail, but unfortunately For Honor just couldn't keep players interested. No Man's Sky. This game promised it all. Some 18 quintillion planets, nearly unlimited exploration, epic battles, and space dinosaurs. So what went wrong? Well, it turns out that the infinite reaches of space can be kind of boring. No Man's Sky peaked on launch day, grabbing upwards of 212,000 concurrent players on Steam. Less than a week later, 78% of those who gave Hello Games' space exploration title a shot simply gave up. Not even 2 full months later, No Man's Sky was seeing less than 1,000 players per hour, resulting in a 94% drop in only 42 days. Street Fighter V. Launched in February 2016, Street Fighter V was supposed to be a major console exclusive for PlayStation 4. Sadly, the vast majority of players who picked up the famous fighting game tapped out, and tapped out quickly. Plaguing the launch of Capcom's title was the stark lack of content and no arcade mode, the bread and butter of the Street Fighter franchise. Even worse, rampant rage quitting soured gamers' experience in multiplayer matches. Quitters ultimately got what was coming to them, but the early damage was done. The poor experience was enough to put over 75% of players off the game, and most people who left Street Fighter V never returned.
Game over!
Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Admittedly, most people put down single-player-only games after they've beaten the main story. Nevertheless, Resident Evil 7 saw 90% of its player base disappear after only 1 month on the market. At the game's peak, it averaged roughly 15,000 players per hour on Steam. 1 month later, that number has dwindled to 1,500 per hour. Rapidly declining player base aside, Resident Evil 7 was a pretty big success for the franchise, with launch numbers doubling that of Resident Evil 6, and with the game being received well by both critics and fans alike. Still, at its best, Resident Evil 7 topped out at number 19 on Steam's charts, and shareholders apparently weren't impressed. Fortunately, none of that looks like it's putting a damper on Resident Evil 8. Evolve. It only took 1 month for 2K Games' multiplayer-centric Evolve to feel the pressure of a rapidly declining player base. Not only did the game receive mixed reviews, but its expensive DLC package certainly didn't leave a good taste in any gamer's mouths. The game saw its player base dwindle on almost a daily basis, steadily decreasing until Turtle Rock Studios had no choice but to swallow their pride and make the game free to play, a last resort for a game that released at full retail. Making the game cost nothing effectively injected some life into the title, but the boost didn't last long, and you'll find yourself sitting in a matchmaking lobby for a long time these days. Battleborn. Gearbox Software, the studio behind the popular Borderlands series, poured more than 2 years' worth of resources into the creation of Battleborn, only to have their first-person game completely overshadowed by Blizzard's outstanding Overwatch. Battleborn had such a rough launch, in fact, that the game only saw an abysmal 12,101 concurrent players on release day, and absolutely plummeted in the days and weeks that followed. In a desperate attempt to keep the game alive, the developers have made the game essentially free to play. Sometimes the stars just don't align. Pokémon GO. Niantic's mobile app Pokémon GO took the world by storm when it launched in July 2016. By September, however, the game was all but abandoned. According to reports, Pokémon GO peaked on July 13, 2016, with 28.5 million users in the United States alone. Nearly 9 million of those users quit playing by the end of the month. By the following month, almost 2/3 of the app's peak users decided they'd had enough of the craze. Nevertheless, Niantic had a major hit on their hands, proving that the Pokémon brand is as viable as ever. Titanfall. Released just a few months after the Xbox One, Respawn's first iteration in the Titanfall series was slated to be the first true next-gen title. Sadly, the game was hamstrung by content, and saw its player base dropped off quickly. The biggest problem was that Titanfall wasn't just an online shooter, it was, for all intents and purposes, an online-only first-person shooter, lacking a single-player campaign or any content for users not looking to play the same multiplayer matches day in and day out. Plus, being an Xbox One exclusive severely limited the player base to begin with, and many of the console's gamers moved on quickly to other titles. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.